Now, if you've played around with SharePoint for any time, you'll know you can do a lot with it just using a web browser. If you have the right permissions, you'll be able to use the menu options to make new pages. You can take an existing page and use the edit option of the ribbon to change the content on that page. You can grab web parts used on these pages and drag them around, move images around, change them, delete them. You can save your changes or just discard the changes you've made. You can use the menu options to add new lists and libraries, which themselves will generate new pages to edit those lists and libraries. But you can't do everything through the browser, and to customize these sites in a significant way will require an application called SharePoint Designer 2010. Now, unlike SharePoint 2010 Foundation and SharePoint Server 2010, which are installed on a shared server, SharePoint Designer 2010 is a free application from Microsoft that is installed on your own machine, your own desktop or laptop, like installing Dreamweaver or Photoshop or Microsoft Word. And once installed, instead of opening a SharePoint site in a web browser, you can open that same site in SharePoint Designer and do more with it. Now, SharePoint Designer 2010 is really 3 programs squeezed into one, and people use it for 3 very big but very different reasons. First, they use it to change the visual appearance of a SharePoint site, change fonts and colors, define custom layouts and custom templates, and that's what we'll be doing in this course. But you can also use SharePoint Designer to create and edit workflows. These are defined business processes, sets of rules and tasks to be automated, but this is not what we're doing here. And 3, you can affect the structure of a SharePoint site, not just the presentation, not how it looks, but what the sites are actually made of, their lists and their libraries. You can also connect to data sources and make the SharePoint site talk to the outside world. Again, not really what we're focused on here. But because it's used for 3 very different reasons, do expect that we won't explore every part of this program in this course. We're going to focus on using SharePoint Designer to do visual customization of SharePoint that cannot be done in the browser. So if you haven't already installed it, now is the time to download it from the Microsoft Office site. SharePoint Designer is free, and one of the easiest ways to get to it is just to search for it using your favorite search engine. Do make sure that you're searching for the 2010 version of this product. I'm just going to click this first link that takes me to Microsoft.com. That itself gives me a point to download it. And you'll find it's available in both 32-bit and 64-bit versions. Now the question might be, which one do I install? There is no difference in features. What you need to find out is what version of Microsoft Office you have. So I'm just going to jump down and open up a Microsoft Office application, such as Word. I'm going to jump to my File and to Help. And I can see over here that it's telling me I have a version 14, but it's 32-bit. And that's because if you have Microsoft Office 2010 installed, it's actually quite sensitive to whether it's the 32-bit or 64-bit. It doesn't want to have a mixture of both. And because SharePoint Designer is technically part of Microsoft Office, I now need the 32-bit version. So I could just go ahead and download this and install it. Now, SharePoint Designer 2010 is not backwards compatible, and it won't work with sites created using SharePoint 2007. So if you still have to work with multiple versions of SharePoint on the server side, you can have multiple versions of SharePoint Designer installed, which is fine. SharePoint Designer 2010 does not overwrite SharePoint Designer 2007. And that's unlike the other Office programs, which typically do overwrite any predecessor. Now, I'm often asked, can someone use another web development tool, something they're more familiar with, like Dreamweaver or Coda, to change SharePoint? And while technically you can do some level of customization using those tools, after all, we will be working with CSS and with HTML, you'd really be making life hard for yourself when you're living in the SharePoint world, because there are things you can do in SharePoint Designer in seconds that would take hours to do any other way. SharePoint Designer is a program that's built to understand SharePoint in a way that all other web design tools don't. And it is the simplest way to do many of these customization tasks. And certainly the few hours you'll spend learning it will be more than worth it.